This might have to come out in chunks because I don't think my voice is gonna cooperate, so. Oh, God. Please bear with whatever pauses happen. But I'm having an idea. But I am very liminal and stoned, and I will forget it. And frankly, I'm not sure I'm the one that's supposed to execute it anyway, because I am struggling so hard. So maybe just releasing it into the wild with some art will be perfect. Oh. I just read an article on the BBC News. I posted it to my Facebook. The post is open to anyone if you need to see what I'm talking about. But there's a story about an executive order to take the Smithsonian and other museums and galleries and have them conform like the education system is supposed to. And I just, if I could cry, I would be. I equated it in my post to the Library of Alexandria. Like, people think it was this just one fire that did it in, but it really wasn't. That fire was bad. Don't get me wrong, it sucked. There were, I know they have in the movie, Elizabeth Taylor is crying over it, but okay, but it was really a whole bunch of disasters that just chiseled away at it, until, very little was left. There's apparently a new Library of Alexandria, and that makes me so happy. I can't even tell you, because I just love the idea of resilience in that way. I've seen, I saw a documentary about it. I've seen pictures. It looks gorgeous. Well done. And here we are, just taking a wrecking ball to so many people's life's work. To, the study of history is a difficult thing. I was working towards a PhD in it. My focus was on the acculturation of children in Restoration London, with my minor field being Latin American colonial history, because I had gone into Georgetown able to speak and read Spanish, and at least, stumble through enough Latin that I passed the fluency. And then I had a semester to learn enough French to pass the fluency, but it wasn't a spoken one, it was just a written one, so that was easier. I got to work at the Library of Congress. I got to work at the Folger Shakespeare Library. I worked freelance as a research assistant for a historian. I respected beyond words. And, I didn't finish because of the medical situation. But you can't take the education away, you can't take the experiences away. Thank heavens. So here I am. Oh God, it's morning. And wishing I could cry because the grief is that strong. I would spend any break I had in especially the art galleries, but, forgive me.
I'm an artist. I was always carrying around a sketchbook and a book for my poetry and prose. Back then, I was an artist on the down low, though. The thought that, I got so much enrichment, so much joy out of these stories unlike my own, whether it was the galleries or one of the Smithsonian's exhibitions. Like, I remember the American History Museum taught me about the life experience of so many that I would never have been exposed to in this country. We forget how unique and outrageously common our life experience can be. I was hoping I sat up a little bit, but that might make the time spent working significantly shorter. I'm always having to figure out the way to stay in peace and living as long as I can without causing the body any more harm. There is a lot of pain in this life. My own specifically I was talking about. I mean, technically, I guess you could expand that out significantly. But there's a lot of pain in this life, and I have gotten adept at stealing moments of joy. And that's, the Folger and the Library of Congress, those museums and the galleries. Oh my God. To think that that's not going to be as available to people, that they won't be able to have the exchange of ideas and challenging their status quo just breaks my heart. But I had a call to action just spring into my head. I was born in 1970. I'm a Gen X. And I got to have a unique experience of life. And I knew shockingly early that my experience was not like other kids' experience. And that tricked me for a long time. So I had to write the things that I wrote, the CV of suffering, because if I talk about resilience, it's not going to mean anything unless you know that I'm actually speaking from experience. I am extraordinarily privileged, and I know that. But part of that privilege is sitting here in significant distress night after night after day after night after night for years on end, and still draw as much joy out of this existence as I possibly can. And I am deeply aware right now that the reason I can do that is because of the education I was able to receive, because of those museums and exhibits and shows. And that information is just going to disappear. The fact that if we're not careful, the fact that lives like mine, where, I've had to struggle so much with disability, and who cares? We've all got our burdens. I still have had a good life. And yet there are people who have tried to destroy me for saying that. It's just I'm extraordinarily stubborn. So the thing is, art doesn't have to be good. Writing doesn't have to be fantastic, but we need to start writing down what lives we had, what we've been through, what we've experienced. And you may not want to share it with anybody, but I think there's an alarming chance that I didn't have any kids, but societally, the next few generations will need to know that, this kind of life of joy and growth and learning, the wonders that you've known. This was real, and we are important. And the world that we were born into doesn't exist anymore. And even if all change that happens from now on is fantastic, and hundreds of years from now, much to my shock, if I could time travel, I would find out things work out well. We are still in a time of such profound change that someone born in 100 years will not fundamentally be able to understand what our life was like. When I was studying the 17th century, I loved studying that time period because, especially for London, there were so many pamphlets that people were, I got to read hundreds and hundreds of sermons. I got to read linguistic manuals. I got to read child rearing manuals. There was this explosion of information which helped me as a historian, wannabe. And none of it was wasted because so much of my writing talks about issues of identity and this theft of idea. That's why my name is what it is. I felt everyone deserved to know I was a thief right off the bat. Didn't quite get the message out as much as I would have liked, but write your stories. Write your parents' stories. Even if you think they were lying out their ass. Just say, yeah, this is what I tend to do a lot. Hey, I was told this by my grandma who, never told the same story the same way twice, and there may or may not have been a murder. It depended on her mood. So take it for what it is. Because even those stories tell us about life. They tell us about what was expected of people, what their dreams were, what they thought was a failure. Art, right now especially, does not have to be good. It is not the end result. Like, I love her. She's gonna be great. The layer that I'm working on, I'll be able to lighten up so there's a difference between the, figure and the background. I'll be able to do finishing touches and other shades of gray. This is gonna be awesome, but the point of it for me is the time I spend just making art. I'm lucky. Like, I'm really, truly lucky. Just this. This is all I need. I can tuck all my loving into it. I can just create lines until gratitude finds me. I'm a lucky, lucky bastard. That bliss is cheap for me in a way. But the reason it's so cheap is I've been making art. I'm 54 years old. I've been making art every day, probably for 50 of those years. And when I say every day, I'm disabled. There were days that, I didn't consider it art. There were days that all I did was move stories forward in my head. But the nice part about writing fiction is that's still work. But I have put pen to paper one way or the other nearly every day. There are the exceptions were agony and well documented after they finally passed. But because of that relentlessness, I can do this in almost any condition. And I'm grateful. Oh God, I'm so grateful for it. But the point being, I have no end of people that will tell me this art is terrible. I have it written in my medical records that I shouldn't be allowed to make art. I have had such blowback. When I was 16, my mother burned everything I'd ever made. It is in the making of this art that my life has found meaning. Not in the dissemination of it, not in the... I've had some success, but it really... Right now, it doesn't matter. I have been able to take what has been a very challenging journey and cultivate loving and compassion and mercy until I am so good at living in my joy that it hampers medical care, which I am finally beginning to see as a kind of terrible success. Write down your stories. It doesn't have to be good. The thing about it is your grandchildren, your great-grandchildren, they need to know that whatever world they're living in, oh, well, that was me supposed to be taking out the trash, but I took it out an hour ago. That's part of why I'm broken. I can't get it the whole way to the curb. I can't even lift the trash bags out of the cans, but I can drag the cans to the porch, and from there a neighbor helps me. And I'm grateful for it, very much so. Write down your stories, even things, maybe especially things that don't strike you as moments of pride. We've been taught to be so ashamed. And the thing is, without honesty, change is impossible. I shouldn't say that. You can change in really shitty and terrible ways. Growth is impossible. We can't sit in denial forever. Eventually, circumstances change enough that even the most fortunate among us has to sit back and say, oh shit, I am old and things hurt and I need help in ways I didn't before. Things are going to be very hard. And there's going to be this huge temptation. Because, people tend to be assholes. To act like it's the younger generation's fault. But if we think about our pasts and our youths and how our elders treated us, it'll help us be a little more compassionate, I think. But also, at the very least, it will let those generations that might hold us as a bit of the problem, because frankly we are, and maybe hold us with a bit more compassion. And also, frankly, it might help people take responsibility for the times they were an asshole. Anyway, I guess that's it. Write it down. Give it to your family. Put it whatever you feel like you could for public. Our lives are going to be disappearing. And we can't let that happen. Maybe we'll find better ways. Maybe we'll look back at this time and be like, oh, yeah, it was shitty. But we found better ways. I think that's really the best we can hope for at any point in time. When I was trying to have kids, I used to remind myself and others that the best any parent can really hope for is to screw their children up in new and different ways. We need to take responsibility for the fact that I speak here as a American of the complexion that I am. We have been really taught that this progress, this life that we've had was the ideal. That whole idea of make America great again is presupposed on the fact that we were, in fact, great. And there was a lot of that in those museums, I have one history book still, there's a lot of baggage to it. I can try to remember to link to a story about it, but I keep one history book out of a passel of really horrible things my mother had found in my grandmother's house. Not her mother, but my paternal grandmother's house. Because we have used history and story and myth to screw each other over and be cruel. And, they always say the winners write the histories. But right now we have a chance to write our own histories. I don't know if anybody's read Studs Terkel, but he collected oral histories about the Depression. We have this beautiful wide internet, and we need to start telling our stories. And we need to remember that every human being on the planet has stories like we do. Every single one. It's not just for, white people. It's not just for Christians. It's not just for Americans. It's not just for every single human being on this planet has their story and their history. And just this glorious depth to them And we have so many who act like that's not true. So prove them wrong. Even if they don't listen now, create something. It might reach someone else's hands, and at the very least, they can say, oh, one fool found peace and happiness and joy. Let's see how they did it.